The great hall was silent. Ambassador Kong Yuna stood alone at the center of the circular chamber, surrounded by 12 towering platforms where the leaders of the Galactic Concord sat in judgment. The crystal dome above her head showed the stars of 1,000 worlds, but none of them belonged to humanity anymore. She had been standing there for 3 hours. Her legs ached. Her throat was dry, but she did not move, did not complain, did not show weakness. That was what they wanted. That was what they expected from the young species that had dared to reach for the stars. "The evidence is clear," said Counselor Vethra from his platform. His insectoid body clicked and shifted as he spoke, his 4 arms gesturing dramatically. "Humanity has violated the sacred boundaries of Concord law. They have taken worlds that were not theirs to take." Yuna looked up at him. Those worlds were empty. No species had claimed them for 10,000 years. "They were reserved," Vethra replied. "Spiritually reserved for future expansion of the Elder races. There was no record of this. Reservation in any treaty we signed. Ignorance is not an excuse." Admiral Park Taiho watched from the observation gallery above. He was 58 years old, and he had served humanity's fleet for 35 of those years. He had seen battles. He had seen death. But he had never seen anything as dangerous as this room full of politicians deciding the fate of his species. The real crime, he knew, was not the boundary worlds. The real crime was that humanity had grown too fast. In just 87 years, humans had spread across 40 star systems. They had built ships that could match Concord vessels. They had populations that doubled every generation. The elder races looked at humanity and saw a threat that would one day challenge their power, so they had found an excuse to stop it. "High Arbiter," Strawn raised one ancient hand. He was the oldest being in the room, perhaps the oldest being in the galaxy. His species, the Cathosi, had been traveling between stars when humanity's ancestors were still living in caves. When he spoke, everyone listened. "We will now vote," he said. His voice was like wind through dead leaves. "The question before us is simple. Should humanity be expelled from the Galactic Concord? Should their colonies outside their home system be seized? Should their military be reduced to defensive capabilities only?" Yuna felt her heart pounding, but her face remained calm. She had prepared for this moment. Everyone had told her it would not come to this. Everyone had said the Concord valued fairness and justice. Everyone had been wrong. The votes came one by one. The Sylvari voted yes. The Cathos voted yes. The Morith hegemony voted yes. Species after species raised their hands against humanity. 3 voted no. The Vrillians abstained, as they always did in political matters, but it was not enough. It was never going to be enough. "The vote is 9-3, Drawn announced. "Humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Concord. You have 1 standard year to withdraw from all colonies outside your home system. Your fleet will be reduced to 50 vessels. Any resistance will be met with combined military action." The words hit Yuna like physical blows. 1 year, 50 ships. Millions of humans scattered across dozens of worlds, told to abandon their homes and return to an Earth that could not hold them all. She looked up at Vethra. The silvery counselor was not even trying to hide his satisfaction. His mandibles clicked together in what passed for a smile among his kind. "Do you have anything to say, Ambassador?" Drawn asked. Yuna was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned and looked up at the observation gallery where Admiral Taiho sat watching. Their eyes met across the vast distance of the chamber. She had known this man for 20 years. She had seen him laugh at dinner parties and weep at funerals. She had watched him send young soldiers to their deaths and carry their memory with him every day after. He was not a man who made decisions lightly. He gave her a single, slow nod. Yuna turned back to face the assembly. When she spoke, her voice was steady and clear, carrying to every corner of the great hall. "You have made your choice," she said. "Now humanity will make ours." She walked toward the massive doors at the far end of the chamber. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. No one tried to stop her. No one said a word. As she reached the doors, Vethra called out, "Where do you think you are going, Ambassador?" "We have not dismissed you." She did not turn around. I am returning to my people, she said. We have much to discuss. You will comply with the judgment of this assembly. Just enough to look back over her shoulder. The Concord has made it clear that humanity is no longer welcome among you. Very well, we accept your decision. But do not mistake our departure for surrender. She pushed open the doors and stepped through. They sealed behind her with a sound like a tomb closing. In the observation gallery, Admiral Tai-Ho rose from his seat. A young aide rushed to his side. Sir, what do we do now? Tai-Ho looked down at the assembly chamber, where the counselors were already celebrating their victory. They thought they had contained the threat. They thought humanity would scatter and fade. Broken by isolation and economic collapse, they had no idea what was coming. Now, Tai-Ho said quietly, we show them why that was the worst mistake they have ever made. He walked out of the gallery without looking back. Behind him, the stars continued to shine through the crystal dome, cold and indifferent to the small creatures below who played at being gods. But among those stars, hidden in the darkness between worlds, 600 warships waited in silence. They had been waiting for 40 years. And now, finally, their time was coming. The galaxy believed they had just witnessed the end of humanity's story. They were wrong. They had witnessed the beginning of something far more dangerous. They had created an enemy that would never forget, never forgive, and never stop fighting until the wrong had been made right. And somewhere in the void, the Iron Wake was stirring. 3 weeks after the verdict, Earth went silent. The trade ships stopped coming. The diplomatic channels went dark. The communication relays that had connected humanity to the rest of the galaxy fell quiet one by one, until there was nothing but emptiness where a civilization had been. The Galactic Concord watched and waited. They expected panic. They expected desperate pleas for mercy. They expected humanity to realize how small they truly were. Instead, they got silence deep beneath the Himalayan mountains. In a command center that did not appear on any official map, President Choi Min-ho stood before the United Earth Security Council. The room was carved from solid rock, shielded from every known form of detection. 40% of humanity's most powerful leaders sat around a curved table, their faces lit by the soft glow of holographic displays. Ladies and gentlemen, Min-ho said, the day we hoped would never come has arrived, but we are not unprepared. General Baek Soo-hee stepped forward. She was 62 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much war. She had spent the last 20 years building something that most of the people in this room had never known existed. Project Iron Wake, she said, and a holographic map appeared above the table. 40 years ago, our first diplomats returned from the Galactic Concord with a warning. They told us that the elder races would never accept humanity as equals. They would tolerate us only as long as we remained small and weak. The moment we became a threat, they would move to destroy us. She touched the map, and 200 points of light appeared in the darkness between stars. So we began preparing. In secret, without the knowledge of the Concord or even most of our own government. The council members stared at the map in disbelief. Minister of Defense, Ru Juan, leaned forward. Are those military installations? Hidden shipyards, Soo-hee confirmed. Manufacturing facilities. Training bases. Supply depots. All of them built in deep space, far from any trade routes or sensor networks. All of them invisible to the Concord. President Min-ho watched the faces around the table. He saw shock. He saw anger at being kept in the dark. But mostly he saw hope. How many ships? Asked Admiral Shinbora, commander of Earth's official fleet. 600 warships of the line, Soo-hee replied. 200 support vessels. Enough firepower to match any single Concord species. The room erupted in whispered conversations. 600 ships? The Concord had demanded they reduce their fleet to 50. They had no idea. Dr. Han Ji-ho stood up from his seat at the back of the room. He was a small man with thick glasses and hands that never stopped moving. He was also the most brilliant scientist humanity had ever produced. The ships are only part of it, he said. May I, General? Soo-hee nodded, and Jiho walked to the center of the room. He pulled a small device from his pocket and placed it on the table. A new hologram appeared, showing the internal structure of an engine unlike anything the Council had seen before. The Prometheus drive, Jiho said. 43 years ago, one of our explorer vessels discovered a derelict ship in the Void Territories. It was old. Incredibly old. Far older than any known civilization. We spent 2 decades studying it, and we learned how to build this. He gestured at the hologram. This drive allows our ships to travel at 3 times the speed of anything in the Concorde fleet. More importantly, it allows for short-range jumps during combat. Our vessels can appear, strike, and vanish before enemy weapons can lock on. Admiral Shinbora shook her head slowly. Why keep this secret? Why not share it with the Concorde? Because they would have taken it from us, President Minho said. They would have called it a threat to galactic stability. They would have used it as another excuse to put us in our place. We kept it secret because we knew this day would come. General Suhi brought up another display. We have already begun evacuating the boundary worlds. All civilian populations are being relocated to hidden colonies that the Concorde does not know exist. By the time their fleet arrives to claim their prize, they will find nothing but empty cities. And then? Asked Minister Ru. And then we wait, Suhi said. We let them think they have one. We let them grow comfortable. And when the time is right, we show them exactly what humanity is capable of. 2,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface, Captain Yoon Hannah stood on the bridge of the TSS Revenant. She was 34 years old, the youngest captain in the Shadow Fleet. And she had been preparing for this moment her entire adult life. The Revenant was a Voidbreaker-class warship, the most advanced vessel humanity had ever built. It carried weapons that could crack a planet's crust. It moved with a speed that seemed impossible, and it was just one of many. Her first officer, Lieutenant Commander Odaewan, approached with a tablet. Captain, we have received confirmation from command. All Shadow Fleet vessels are to maintain dark running until further orders. Hannah nodded. The Concorde will send ships to the boundary worlds within the month. They will expect to find frightened colonists begging for mercy. Instead, they will find ghosts.
Out.
She looked out at the stars through the bridge view screen. Somewhere out there, the elder races were celebrating their victory over the upstart humans. They were toasting to a future where humanity would never trouble them again. They had no idea that the real war had not even begun. On the surface of Boundary World 7, the last transport lifted off carrying the final group of colonists. The city below had been home to 50,000 people just 3 months ago. Now it was empty, its streets silent, its buildings dark. But before the transport jumped to faster-than-light speed, its crew left one final gift. A message beacon, placed in the central square of the abandoned capital. When the Concorde fleet arrived 6 weeks later, they found the beacon waiting for them. It activated as their ships entered orbit. Broadcasting a simple message in every language known to the galaxy, "We remember what you did." The Sylvari commander who received the message felt something he had not felt in a very long time. It took him a moment to recognize it. It was fear. 6 months passed, and the galaxy began to notice that something was wrong. Trademaster Corin of the Vrillian Merchant Guild stood in his office aboard the trading station Horizon's Edge, staring at reports that made no sense. The Vrillians were the greatest traders in known space. They tracked every cargo ship, every trade route, every economic shift across 1,000 star systems. They knew things that governments did not, and what they knew about humanity was impossible. "These numbers cannot be correct," Corin said to his assistant. "Check them again." "I have checked them 7 times, Master. The data is accurate." Corin looked at the holographic display floating before him. According to Concorde intelligence, humanity was collapsing. Their economy was in ruins. Their colonies were abandoned. Their people were starving, but the shipping data told a different story. Human cargo vessels were moving in greater numbers than before the condemnation. They were carrying food, building materials, industrial equipment. They were traveling on routes that did not exist on any official map. "Where are they going?" Corin whispered. "Where are all these ships going?" He had no answer, and that terrified him. Far across the galaxy, Counselor Vethra was asking similar questions. He stood in the intelligence center of the Sylvari homeworld, surrounded by analysts who looked increasingly nervous. "Explain this to me," Vethra demanded. "How are the humans communicating? We have monitored every frequency, every relay, every known method of transmission. We should be intercepting their messages." "We are intercepting them, Counselor," the lead analyst replied. "But we cannot read them. Their encryption is encryption. We have never seen anything like it. Our best codebreakers estimate it would take 300 years to decrypt a single message." Vethra's mandibles clicked in frustration. "What about their ships? Surely we can track their movements." "We are trying. But they keep appearing in places they should not be. Last week, a human freighter was spotted near the Cathozi border. 3 days later, the same ship was seen in Morith space. That journey should take 2 weeks at maximum speed." "That is impossible." "Yes, Counselor." "It is." Commander Sunwoo read the intelligence reports with quiet satisfaction. He was the leader of humanity's Ghost Operations Division, and his people had been very busy over the past 6 months. His office was aboard a ship that did not officially exist, somewhere in the vast emptiness between stars. From here, he coordinated the most sophisticated sabotage campaign in galactic history. "Status report," he said to his communications officer. "Phase 2 is proceeding on schedule, Commander. We have disabled 47 Concord early warning stations. 62 communication relays have been corrupted with false data, and our people have successfully infiltrated 3 major intelligence agencies." Sunwoo nodded. "What about the Sylvari fleet movements?" Lieutenant Jung Yoon-ji transmitted her latest report 6 hours ago. "The Sylvari are massing ships at Nexus Station. Current count is 1,800 vessels, with more arriving daily. They are preparing for invasion." "Yes, sir. Estimated launch date is 4 to 5 months from now." Sunwoo leaned back in his chair. The Sylvari thought they were being clever, building their fleet in secret. They had no idea that humanity had eyes everywhere. Lieutenant Jung Yoon-ji was one of those eyes. She had been living among the Sylvari for 3 years, disguised as a member of a lesser species that served as laborers and servants. No one looked twice at a servant. No one thought they might be listening. She had watched the war fleet grow from a few hundred ships to nearly 2,000. She had counted every vessel, noted every weapon system, mapped every weakness. And every night, she transmitted her findings through a communication device hidden in her body, using signals that the Sylvari could not detect. It was dangerous work. If she was discovered, her death would not be quick. But she did not complain. Humanity needed her, and she would not fail. On the edge of human space, Cathozi observation post went dark. The station had been monitoring human activity for decades. It was supposed to be undetectable, hidden in the shadow of a dead moon. But 3 days ago, it had stopped transmitting. A Cathozi patrol ship was sent to investigate. When they arrived, they found the station intact. There was no damage to the hull, no signs of combat, no bodies. But every computer had been wiped clean. Every record had been erased. And on the main view screen, someone had left a message in the Cathozi language. "We know you are watching. Now you know we are watching too." The patrol commander reported his findings to the High Arbiter. The ancient being listened in silence, then dismissed the commander without a word. Alone in his chambers, Dron thought about what he had done 6 months ago. He had voted to condemn humanity. He had believed it was the right choice. The humans were growing too fast, spreading too far. They needed to be contained before they became a threat. But now, he wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. The humans were not collapsing. They were not surrendering. They were doing something else entirely, and no one knew what it was. For the first time in centuries, the High Arbiter felt uncertain. Counselor Vethra felt no such uncertainty. He stood before the Galactic Assembly and demanded immediate action. "The humans are planning something," he declared. "Every day we wait, they grow stronger. We must strike now, before it is too late."
Ow.
But the other species were not so eager. They had heard the reports of vanishing stations and impossible ships. They had seen the empty colonies and the mocking messages. The humans they had condemned were not behaving like a defeated species, they were behaving like predators. Waiting in tall grass, the vote was called. This time, only 6 species supported military action. 3 opposed it openly. The rest abstained. Unwilling to commit to a war, they were no longer sure they could win. Vethra stormed out of the chamber. His plans delayed but not abandoned. He would have his war, with or without the full support of the Concord. That night, Trademaster Corrin made a decision. He opened a secure channel to Earth and requested a meeting. If war was coming, the Varelians wanted to be on the winning side. And increasingly, they were not sure which side that would be. Nexus Station hung in the darkness like a monument to silvery power. It was the largest military installation in Concord space, a fortress of metal and fire that had never been conquered. Around it, 2,000 warships waited in perfect formation, their weapons charged, their crews ready. War leader Skethra stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Vengeance. He was the greatest military commander the Sylvari had produced in 3 generations. Today he would lead the fleet that would finally destroy humanity. "My warriors," he broadcast to every ship in the fleet. "Today we begin the cleansing of a disease that has infected our galaxy. The humans thought they could hide from justice. They thought they could escape their punishment. They were wrong. When we are finished, their homeworld will burn, and their species will be nothing but a memory." The fleet roared its approval. 2,000 ships began powering up their engines, preparing for the jump that would take them to Earth, and then the sensors screamed. "War leader," the sensor officer shouted. "Gravity distortion detected. Multiple contacts emerging from faster than light." Skethra spun toward the display. "Where? How many?" The officer's voice shook. "Everywhere, sir. They are everywhere." 800 human warships emerged from the void simultaneously. They appeared in a perfect sphere around Nexus Station, cutting off every escape route, blocking every retreat. Their formation was so precise, so coordinated that it seemed impossible. Admiral Park Taiho stood on the bridge of his flagship, the TSS Unyielding. He was calm, almost peaceful, as he looked at the Silveray fleet trapped before him. "Open a channel," he said. "All frequencies." His communications officer nodded. "Channel open, Admiral." Taiho's voice carried across the void, reaching every ship in the Silvari fleet. Every station in Concord space, every world that was listening. "You condemned us for existing. You planned to erase us. We're here to demonstrate why that was a mistake." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Your fleet is surrounded. Your station is within range of our weapons. You have one opportunity to surrender. If you refuse, we will show you no mercy." War leader Skethra laughed. Actually laughed. The humans were outnumbered more than 2 to 1. They had walked into a trap of their own making. "All ships," he commanded, "destroy them." The Silvari fleet opened fire. 2,000 ships unleashed their weapons in a storm of energy and destruction that should have torn the human fleet apart. But the human ships were not where the weapons were aimed. They moved. They moved faster than anything Skethra had ever seen. One moment they were there, the next they had jumped 1,000 kilometers in any direction. The Silvari weapons hit nothing but empty space. "What is happening?" Skethra demanded. "Why can we not hit them? They're using some kind of short-range jump drive, war leader. Our targeting systems cannot predict their movements." Captain Yoon Hana pushed the Revenant into the heart of the Silvari formation. Her ship twisted and spun through a maze of enemy fire, untouched, unstoppable. Around her, the pilots of her squadron followed her lead, dancing between the Silvari vessels like ghosts. "Target their command ships," she ordered. "Take out their communications. Blind them." Ensign Quan Mina sat at the weapons console, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. She was 23 years old, and this was her first battle. She had trained for years for this moment, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of war. "Command ship identified," she reported. "Firing main batteries." The Revenant's weapons struck true. The Silvari communications vessel erupted in flame, its crew dead before they could scream. Mina watched the explosion and felt something twist in her stomach. This was necessary. She knew it was necessary. But that did not make it easier. The battle raged for hours. The Silvari fought with desperation, but they could not adapt to human tactics. Every time they formed a defensive line, the human ships jumped behind them. Every time they concentrated their fire, the humans scattered and struck from new angles. The numbers told the story. 100 silvery ships destroyed in the first hour. 300 by the second, 500 by the third. Human losses were minimal. The Prometheus drive gave them an advantage that could not be overcome. They were not fighting a battle, they were conducting an execution. On the bridge of the Eternal Vengeance, war leader Skethra watched his fleet die. Ship after ship vanished. From his display, replaced by the cold marker of destruction. His perfect formation had become chaos. Its unbeatable fleet had become prey. War leader, his first officer, said quietly, "We must retreat. If we stay, we will all die." "Retreat to where?" Skethra replied. "They are everywhere. There is no escape." He was right. The human sphere had tightened around the remains of the Silver Eye fleet, cutting off every jump route, blocking every path to safety. There was nowhere to run. For hours after the battle began, it ended. 1,400 Silvari ships floated dead in space. Another 300 had surrendered, their crews evacuating 2 life pods. War leader Skethra was captured alive, dragged from his flagship by human marines, who treated him with more dignity than he deserved. Admiral Tyos stood in the aftermath, looking at the destruction his fleet had caused. It gave him no pleasure. War never did. But it had been necessary. Humanity had tried peace. They had tried diplomacy. They had tried to be good members of the galactic community. The Concord had answered with condemnation. Now the Concord would learn the price of that decision. "Open a channel," Taiho ordered. "Broadcast to the entire galaxy." His voice carried across the stars. "Humanity does not seek conquest. We seek to live. Those who would deny us that right will learn the cost. But those who would stand beside us as friends and equals will find us loyal allies." He paused, looking at the burning wreckage that had once been the mightiest fleet in Concord space. "We leave Nexus Station intact as a monument to this day. Let all who see it remember what happens when the galaxy underestimates humanity. Let them remember, and let them choose wisely." Ensign Mina stood at her console, tears streaming down her face. She had survived. Her friends had survived. Humanity had survived, but she could not forget the ships she had destroyed, the lives she had ended. The price of victory. Captain Hannah walked over and put a hand on her shoulder. "It gets easier," Hannah said quietly. "And it never gets easier. Both things are true." Mina nodded. She understood. This was not the end of anything. It was the beginning of a new universe, where humanity would no longer hide in the shadows. The Iron Wake had risen. The galaxy would never be the same. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Nexus Station. The galaxy had changed forever. The Galactic Concord was broken. 3 species had withdrawn entirely, refusing to be part of an organization that had led them into disaster. The Silvari Dominion was in chaos. Its government collapsed, its military shattered. People demanding answers that their leaders could not provide. Counselor Vethra stood before a tribunal of his own kind. The chamber was small and cold, nothing like the Grand Assembly Hall where he had once pronounced judgment on humanity. Now he was the one being judged. "You led us to ruin," the chief judge said. "Your arrogance brought war to our doorstep. Our fleet is destroyed. Our power is broken. And now the humans stand as the strongest military force in known space." Vethra tried to speak, but the judge silenced him with a gesture. "You will spend the rest of your days in isolation, contemplating the destruction you have caused. Take him away." As the guards led him from the chamber, Vethra caught a glimpse of the sky through a window. Somewhere out there, the species he had tried to destroy was building a new future, and he would have no part in it. On Earth, President Choi Minho addressed the United Assembly. The chamber was filled with representatives from every human world. Every colony, every station that had survived the long months of shadow and fear. "We did not want this war," Minho said. "We spent 87 years trying to be good neighbors to the galaxy. We followed their rules. We respected their customs. We asked only to be treated as equals. He paused, his eyes sweeping across the assembled faces. They answered with condemnation. Tried to take our homes, our ships, our future. They failed, and now we must build something new from the wreckage they created. The assembly erupted in applause. After everything they had endured, humanity had not just survived. They had won, but Minho knew that winning a battle was not the same as winning peace. That work was just beginning. Ambassador Kong Yuna returned to diplomacy, but the game had changed completely. She no longer stood alone before hostile councils. Now she negotiated from a position of strength. With the full power of the human fleet behind her, her first meeting was with Trade Master Korin of the Vrelian Merchant Guild. The Vrelians had been neutral throughout the conflict, but they had watched carefully. They had seen which way the winds were blowing. The Vrelian Guild formally recognizes the Terran Interstellar Union as an equal power, Korin announced. We propose a full trade alliance, with favorable terms for both parties, Yuna smiled. We accept, and we hope this is the beginning of a long friendship. 2 other species followed the Vrelians within months. The Morith hegemony, once a firm supporter of the condemnation, quietly opened diplomatic channels. The Cathosi Collective, led by a new High Arbiter, sent official apologies and requests for dialogue. The galaxy was reshaping itself around humanity's new reality. Yuna addressed a reformed Galactic Assembly 6 months later. The chamber was smaller now, with only 8 species represented. But the atmosphere was different. There was no contempt in the eyes watching her. There was respect, and perhaps a little fear. Humanity offers the following terms, she said. We will not expand aggressively into Concord space. We will honor existing borders and treaties. We will pursue trade and cultural exchange with all species who approach us in good faith. She paused, her voice hardening. But we also make this promise. Any attack on human territory, any attempt to repeat the injustice of our condemnation, will be met with total response. We will not wait to be struck. We will not beg for mercy. We will defend ourselves with every weapon at our disposal. The assembly accepted her terms without debate. Admiral Park Tai-ho retired quietly, handing command of the fleet to younger officers. He had done what needed to be done. Now, it was time for others to carry the burden. Captain Yoon Hannah, now Rear Admiral Hannah, found him on the observation deck of Earth Station Prime. He was looking at the stars, his face peaceful. You should be at the celebration, she said. Tai-ho shook his head. I am not a man for celebrations. Too many good people died to bring us here. Hannah stood beside him in silence for a long moment. She understood. The victory they had won was necessary, but it had cost them dearly. Not just in lives, but in innocence. Humanity had proven it could wage war as well as any species in the galaxy. That knowledge came with a weight that never fully lifted. What happens now? She asked. Now comes the harder part, Tai-ho replied. Winning wars is simple, compared to keeping peace. The Concord will always fear us. Some species will always hate us. We must be strong enough to protect ourselves, but wise enough not to become what they accused us of being. He turned to face her. That job falls to you now, Admiral. And 2 officers, like Quan Mina, who will lead the next generation. Do not let the power we have gained corrupt the values we fought to protect. Hannah nodded slowly. I understand, sir. In the Void Territories, far beyond the boundaries of Concord space, a human exploration vessel drifted among ancient ruins. Dr. Han Jiho led the team that investigated the structures, his eyes wide with wonder and growing unease. These buildings are millions of years old, he reported to Earth. They were built by a species far more advanced than anything in the current Concord. And they were destroyed. Completely destroyed. By what? President Minho asked. We do not know, but we have found records, fragments of data that suggest they were not alone. There was another species, something that came from somewhere else, something that wiped them out. The transmission crackled with static. Sir, I believe the same thing that destroyed this civilization may still be out there. And if it is, everything we have faced so far is nothing compared to what is coming. The signal cut off. Minho sat in silence, processing what he had heard. Humanity had won its freedom from the Concord. But the universe was vast. There were things in the darkness that even the elder races had never encountered. On a distant world at the edge of the galaxy, a young Sylvari child sat with her grandmother, watching the stars come out one by one. "Grandmother," the child asked, "who are the humans?" The old Sylvari was quiet for a long moment. She had lived through the war, had seen her people's pride shattered by an enemy they had underestimated. "They are the ones who refused to die," she finally said. "When the whole galaxy stood against them, they did not surrender. They did not break. They fought, and they won. Are they our enemies? They were. Perhaps they still are. But they could have destroyed us completely, and they did not. That means there may be hope for something better someday." The child thought about this. "Do you think we will ever be friends with them?" The grandmother looked up at the stars, where human ships now traveled freely, where human colonies grew and prospered, where a species that had been condemned to extinction had risen to become the strongest power in known space. "I do not know," she admitted, "but I hope so. The universe is too large and too dangerous for us to remain enemies forever." Far away, in the deepest reaches of unexplored space, something ancient stirred. It had slept for millions of years, waiting for the lesser species to grow strong enough to be worth noticing. Now it was awake, and it had detected something new, something that had not existed before. A species that burned with ambition and refused to accept limitations. It found this interesting. The signal it sent traveled at speeds no known technology could match, crossing the void between galaxies in moments. "They are ready," the signal said. "Begin the approach." And in the darkness, something vast began to move toward the light.